Hi, welcome to Inside View. I'm Sid Marsh. Today we're going to be talking about the Measure B election that's coming up, about banning the cultivation of marijuana in Calaveras. And with me today I have Trevor Wittke and Beth Wittke. They're with the Calaveras Calaveras Cannabis Alliance, and we're going to be discussing Measure B. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, okay, first off, you are against the ban. You are a group that are against the ban, right?
Yes.
I want to say, okay.
Yes, we oppose Measure B.
Who are your folks? What is your group, and who are your members?
We're part of the Calaveras Cannabis Alliance. We're a trade association that represents growers in the county. Our membership is derived from both actual applicant growers who have submitted their paperwork with the county as of last year, as well as supporters throughout the community.
Sure.
And there are different businesses that support us, as well as different citizens, as private citizens who have come out and supported us. And so it's a broad cross-section of the county, I would say.
Now, can you remind us, what does Measure B represent? What exactly are they saying with Measure B, the banning of cultivation?
Measure B would ban all commercial cultivation and put strict, onerous restrictions on personal cultivation that go beyond state law and, in fact, are actually in violation of current state law. So it's unclear whether or not their personal exemption is even valid under state law. But essentially, it would, in theory, make all cultivation illegal in the county, except for a small subset that is.
Would that be the medical marijuana? Or?
It would be personal use. You could have 3 plants in an indoor facility in an accessory structure that had to be permitted. So it would cost people tens of thousands of dollars to grow 3 plants. And that, like I said, is in violation of current state law. So it would undo everything that has been established by the county thus far.
Now, how does this interact with the new state law about, making it legal for recreational use and that sort of thing?
Well, state law allows 6 plants grown. It doesn't have to be in an accessory structure. It has to be out of view. But anyone over the age of 21 is allowed to cultivate 6 plants.
But not for resale.
Not for resale, for personal use.
For personal use.
It is double what the Measure B allows for medical patients.
I see.
Which is only 3 plants in an accessory permitted structure.
So what do you think exactly the people that set up this Measure B, what do they expect to get out of this? What do you see how this is going to help the county, or what do you see your opponents' views? I mean, how do you see that?
It's hard to necessarily see their perspective, given the fact that we are quite confident that it is impossible for the county to enforce the ban as it is currently written. It is also unlikely that the ban as it is currently written is going to withstand judicial review. So it's hard to say what their end goal is, other than a desire to eliminate something without putting in an actual plan for getting to their end goal. So they've written up an initiative, they've passed it around the county, but it's hard to see any real enforcement and actual elimination of cultivation in the county as a result of this measure.
Now, I had heard that counties that will ban marijuana will not be able to get any kind of help from the state for eradication or that sort of thing, for their law enforcement. Is that true? Is that what would happen with Calaveras?
True. Yes.
Okay. And what do you now? You're against the ban. What are you for? I mean, a regulation or?
We support regulations that are in line with the regulations created under the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act, which was enacted by the state legislature in October of 2015. It went into effect in January of 2016, and it's a large reason why the county actually adopted the urgency ordinance. There was a deadline that required local municipalities to enact rules by March. This led to a lot of places enacting bans, and Calaveras County went to enact rules. It considered a ban, and then it drafted the draft permanent ordinance. That got tabled because of EIR requirements, environmental impact requirements, and then a land rush happened because the county had indicated a willingness to regulate, and this made it so people all over the state knew that Calaveras County was one of the few places offering potential licenses. Hundreds of people flocked into the county from around the state. And as a result, the county had to adopt the urgency ordinance to stop a land rush that was really significantly impacting the quality of living, particularly in D2, where fire victims were selling their properties.
District 2?
Yes, in District 2. And so this is what put the regulations and the impetus towards regulations was essentially the environmental impacts that were being caused by unregulated growing. And so the county, to try and get a handle on this, adopted the urgency ordinance. And we believe that permanent regulations need to have a few minor tweaks to them, make it so that people in residential areas are able to enjoy their quality of living while also allowing people the right to do what they need to do on their properties and the rights that they're allowed in other areas of the agricultural community. So if you're not a nuisance to your neighbors and you follow a good neighbor policy and you are compliant with every local and state regulation, we think that you should be able to operate and do business in this county.
Well, last year we had, Measure C and Measure D, and C passed, D didn't pass. Now, how does this all interact with the ban, this new Measure B?
Well, if Measure B passes, Measure C goes away. And even though a supermajority of voters wanted to tax cannabis
Can you remind
growers,
us what Measure C was?
It's a canopy tax, which means the county measures your square footage of how many plants you have, and then they charge $2 a square foot for outdoor cultivation and $5 a square foot for indoor cultivation. It's projected to bring in upwards of $11 million in the first year.
Now, where is that money supposed to go?
It goes into the general fund.
The general fund, okay.
And farmers have been eager to pay it. You know, the people are ready with their checkbooks, and the county is not accepting the money just yet. The bills go out in April, I believe, and they're due in June.
So now what happens if the ban is successful, then we won't get Measure C, we won't get the money
That's
from
what
Measure C.
I'm told, that
Okay.
the bills will not go out to the farmers.
And if the ban isn't successful, then they'd have to go into some kind of regulation mode, and then the funds would be available from Measure C.
Mm-hmm. The urgency ordinance would still be in effect if the ban fails, and at that point,
What exactly is the urgency ordinance? What's the wording there?
The urgency ordinance is a temporary regulation that was put in place by the county, and it essentially models the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act that was implemented by the state. There are a few more stricter requirements. For instance, the state allows for 44,000 square feet. The county only allows for 22,000 square feet for commercial as the maximum size. And there's also a smaller canopy for personal cultivation under the urgency ordinance.
So if B fails, then the urgency ordinance would go into effect.
Would continue.
But B will supersede the urgency ordinance.
Correct.
That's how it would work.
Mm-hmm.
It would become a permanent ordinance that would go into effect 30 days after the election.
Okay. What do you think the economic impact of the whole thing is going to be? I mean, overall in the county, what if the ban goes into effect? What do you see will happen? And if the ban it doesn't go into effect, what do you see would happen?
Well, there was a recent study from the University of the Pacific that found that cannabis is upwards of 20% of our local economy.
In Calaveras?
In Calaveras.
Okay.
There are, I'm not the best at coming up with the exact numbers, but 2,600, I believe, jobs in the cannabis field. Then there's another 800 jobs, that hardware stores, grocery stores, ancillary jobs. So it's a $251 million business that goes up to $340 million that radiates throughout the county. That's the economic impact. If the ban happens, a lot of good people are going to leave. They're going to be forced to sell their properties.
Another aspect to that is that there is the local economic productivity. Basically, the cannabis industry represents one of the largest industries in the county as it currently stands.
They have to buy their supplies somewhere.
Exactly. And that's why most of the hardware stores throughout the community are supportive. A lot of the business that they generate and have generated over the last few years has come through the cannabis industry. And in addition to that, there's not just the economic productivity, there's also the impacts to the county's finances. And specifically what could happen is $11 million could be lost in potential tax revenue that would go into the general fund. Additionally, if we were to eradicate every cannabis farm and grow site in the county, the cost could be exorbitant. It's been estimated that each one of the grows that was eradicated last year cost between 5 and 6 figures for a single eradication. So,
and this is county money.
And this is county money,
Okay.
yeah. And so if you take those figures, let's just go with the low end. There are $10,000 for every eradication. You multiply that by 1,600 sites, and you're looking at millions of dollars. So the county would lose tens of millions of dollars in tax revenue and add tens of millions of dollars in additional costs. The math just doesn't add up. There's no way to actually enforce the ban if it costs between $10,000 to $100,000 to eradicate each individual site, and there are 1,600 sites in the county.
That we know of.
That we know of, yeah.
There were also $3.7 million in fees paid,
Which would have to be refunded.
The Water Quality Control Board collected over $1 million from farmers. Those fees would go away. Inspections would end from the Water Quality Control Board. So these regulations go a long way towards ensuring water quality for everybody in the county and everyone downstream. It would be a real sad thing if those inspections went away, if the fees went away.
Now, are there any counties that have an outright ban now?
Yes.
And have you studied what's happened with them?
Yes. There's kind of two models. There's the Butte County model, which relies on fees and fines and a code compliance approach. They have...
Is it an outright ban or are they regulating
It's similar. They've got a small personal cultivation exemption, so you can grow, I believe, 100 square feet of canopy in Butte County. But anything outside of that is considered in violation. And it's a complaint-driven system, so people have to call in on their neighbors. And then as they take in the complaints, they then go out and do an inspection and see the validity of these complaints. They have from all of the fees and fines that they've issued, in the first year they issued almost $3 million in fines. They were able to recoup $170,000.
Right.
There's a 6% return rate. Also in Calaveras County, where we have, for the farms that were found to be out of compliance and didn't abate their grows within 10 days, all of those farms have been given similar fees and fines. They've been about $500,000 in fines have been issued. A similar $30,000 has been recovered. So there seems to be about a 6% recovery rate for the fee and fine model. Then in Humboldt County, from the 90s until basically the present, you have the federal funding model, which is there's a lack of money on the local level because it's a small rural county without a lot of funding, and they've relied on federal grant monies to do their enforcement. And it's impossible for the federal government to enforce local cannabis eradications on the scale necessary to actually eliminate it. Humboldt County saw the mass destruction of their watersheds. It's one of the primary reasons the Water Quality Control Board got involved was because of the level of destruction going on in the North Coast watersheds. the influx of transient labor forces, the unregulated labor force, the lack of labor laws, all of this has produced many problems. Investigative reports have uncovered terrible abuses throughout Humboldt County. And quite simply, a federal prohibition model simply leads to the proliferation of the black market.
Now, you folks are farmers yourselves, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. How do you? What brought you to Calaveras? I mean, why did you come here?
Well, we had friends in the area, and
You talked about the land grab and all that. Were you part of that, or?
oh no, we've been here since the early '90s.
Oh, okay.
And we came here and visited friends, and I was offered a job, and so I took it, and that brought me here.
So you were residents, and then you got into the field.
Correct.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then Prop 215 happened in the late '90s, mid to late '90s, and it was just a way to make a living, and it seemed like a good way to make a living. So I got involved after 215 started.
This was medical marijuana.
Medical marijuana,
right?
which I was a patient. And so I took on extra work because Calaveras has historically had underemployment. It's difficult to raise a small family as a single mom. So I took in cannabis work in the late 90s. And then when my son came of age, he got interested in farming. And so we've been a mother and son team since the late 90s, early 2000s.
Wow, so you've been in it for a while. Now, do you see a big difference now? Is there suddenly a big green rush kind of thing going on, and
Yes.
and money is floating around and that sort of thing, or?
Yes, I think there's a misconception that it's easy money. And I think there is quite a learning curve. A lot of people, like a gold rush, will come in and think that this is an easy thing, and it's not. It takes a tremendous amount of skill, and it takes a while to learn what you're doing. Would you like to speak to that?
Now, if the ban does happen, what is your recourse? What can you do if this does happen? What will go on with the Calaveras Cannabis?
So what's likely to happen is that if you just look at the data from Peter Maurer and the various status reports that the Planning Commission has given on the urgency of ordinance, about 55% of the people who applied are going to get approved. And so that's about 300 farms. Now, if 300 farms are really compliant, they're the people who are going to be impacted by Measure B, because those 350 farms are trying to get a license here in Calaveras County so that they can get state license and operate in the regulated medical marijuana market created under what's called MRSA, the Medical Marijuana Regulatory Safety Act. And so 350 farms want to comply with regulations, and that is their primary priority. Then there's 1,600 farms, so all of the remaining farms, they may not want to comply, and they may think that Measure B is actually in their best interest, because if the county lacks funding for enforcement, lacks means to enforce, then essentially they get the benefits of the black market without the drawbacks. There's no criminal liability for their actions because the county's overwhelmed by the sheer numbers, there's lack of funding, and these people are able to continue selling and cultivating in a way that goes completely unregulated. There won't be any code enforcement stipulations, there won't be any water quality control, environmental regulations, and they get to essentially have zero costs associated with their business. They're the bad actors, and they will benefit from Measure B. The 350 people like myself, my mom, and other people in the Cannabis Alliance, they're probably going to have to shut down operations in the county, recoup what they can by selling their properties, and looking to other areas in the state that are offering licenses.
Is that kind of your plan B because of Measure B? Or?
Well, it is. Many of the regulating counties have moratoriums, though, so it puts us at a great disadvantage. Land prices will be very high in counties that are regulating, it's not going to be an easy task to find another place to work. And it will put us at the back of the line for state licensing.
What do the voters really need to know about about Measure B and the so-called truth, as you say, and the writing of it, and where? What do you want the voters to know?
Well, from my perspective, it won't end cultivation. It will end the county's ability to tax and regulate. Illegal cultivation will continue. And people who have been here for a long time like us will be forced to leave. New people will come in. So it's a gamble on who your new neighbors will be. And I find it somewhat mean-spirited, actually, the ban. The finish the job slogan that they have. And
who are the folks behind the ban of Measure B? Who are your opponents, basically?
The primary people behind it are Bill McManus and David Tono.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
They both have run for the Board of Supervisors and have failed in their campaigns. They wrote the ballot argument supporting Measure B, and a Superior Court judge just found 8 of their statements to be false and misleading in a way that needed to be corrected. I don't know them personally. All I know is their public persona and the way in which they have conducted themselves in their campaign against cannabis. And yeah.
They seem very passionate about their views. They believe, if you base this, I base this on their campaign rhetoric, they believe very seriously that they are helping to save the county. They think that all cannabis providers are bad people, apparently. And they have a zero-tolerance attitude about cannabis. They straight up say that it is not medicine. In spite of the fact that there are federal patients that have been receiving cannabis from the federal government since the 70s, I believe. The U.S. government holds patents on cannabis as a good medicine. The Schedule I federal classification has always been problematic in the Controlled Substance Act. It says that it has no medical benefit, so the federal government's stance on it is
contradictory.
Yeah, it's very contradictory.
Well, yeah, you have the state saying yes, the feds saying no, and then the county kind of up in the air, it seems like.
Right, and right now the DEA is working on import licenses to study cannabis because they don't allow it to be domestically produced. So,
so what they're going to study is going to come from another country.
Yes.
They can't. Okay, interesting.
Yes, they have one university in Mississippi.
University of Mississippi conducts all of the research.
But that's a whole other topic.
But, well, getting back to the question, it appears that Bill McManus and David Tono, the proponents of Measure B, are 100% committed to eliminating cannabis production in the county. Whatever their intentions are, the way that they're going about it seems to be counterproductive. It doesn't actually provide any funding sources or any real regulatory mechanism for getting to the end point that they want to get to. And I would just like for all of the voters to know that they need to research what is being said, and they need to verify any of the claims being made by the proponents of Measure B for themselves. They need to do the research, look at the studies that have been produced in California on environmental impacts, and every one of them concludes by saying we need regulations. Look at the UOP study that looks at the economic impact. The economic impact is a very real, calculable impact. The numbers are actually quite conservative, relatively speaking, if you compare it to studies that are conducted in Colorado, Washington, or Oregon, or other states where they're actually looking at the data as it's coming in. the numbers are surpassing expectations in terms of economic productivity and tax revenues across the country.
In the states that where it is legal, it's been legal for a while. Are there counties that have banned it? I mean,
Yes.
they're kind of going against the state.
So in Colorado, there are a number of municipalities and local jurisdictions that have enacted bans, and they did so in a very similar way as we've seen here in California. There was a rush to ban. Then people saw the benefits and started to pull back and started to enact regulations after they had rushed into ban because the benefits are there.
Well, now you have a website, right?
Yes, there is CalaverasCannabis.com and BetterCalaveras.com.
So if people want more information, they can go there and find out exactly what's going on.
Is that .com or .org?
.com.
Okay.
So yes, the BetterCalaveras.com is where you can get all of the information on the No on B campaign, and Calaveras Cannabis Alliance is where you can reach out to, or CalaverasCannabis.com is where you can reach out to us at the Cannabis
So if you're a
Alliance.
grower, go to that one.
Yes,
and
yes.
join.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to say about your stance, on the ban and anything we haven't covered at all?
Well, I think it's important to note that dispensaries will also be closing.
There you go.
And there are 3 licensed dispensaries in the county. There have been no problems with those dispensaries, to my knowledge. They're operating upstanding businesses. And it forces patients to go out of the county. So it does eliminate safe access here in Calaveras for sick people.
So, yeah, it does affect the people that actually need it.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for being with us. We really appreciate we really appreciate you being here. Excuse me a second. So, Beth, Trevor, we wish you luck in your endeavors.
Well, thank you.
And we'll see what happens. What is it, May 2nd?
Yes.
Yes,
And everybody, that's going to be a mail-in
it is.
campaign.
All mail-in, yeah. The ballots will go out on April 3rd.
April 3rd. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm Sid Marsh. This has been Inside View, and thank you for watching.